Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Grudniblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Genos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy. And this podcast, I'm going to be doing a deep dive on my four fantasy teams from this past season. I'll be analyzing what I did right as well as what I did wrong so I can learn something and get better next year. And hopefully you can too. Let's get it. Welcome on in, everyone. Unfortunately, I do not have your friend and my best friend, Mr. Blake Creamer, here with me this evening. So there is good news. He did win the 80s movie trivia that I mentioned, but what I didn't realize is that that means that he moves on and he kind of upgrades, and now he's doing 90s movie trivia. 90s, obviously, an infinitely better decade than the 80s. For obvious reasons, but yeah, kind of a misplay on my part, I guess. Didn't realize that, there are levels to this thing. So obviously, this is kind of the final boss. 90s are the best decade. That's confirmed. But I think that we can expect to have Blake back on the podcast very soon, is what I'm trying to say. One other thing I want to mention before I get started here, I am going to be heading into downtown Toronto. I do this once every year after the fantasy season wraps up. I'm going to be in downtown Toronto May 10th in the evening. I usually find a spot at a bar downtown and we watch some hockey together. We drink some beer together. We have a good time and reminisce about how terrible or how great our fantasy seasons went, as the case may be. Done it the last few years and it's been great every single time to catch up with people. So if you are able to be in the Toronto area on May 10th, that's Saturday coming up, then definitely you should try to find your way in there. Get your way into the Apples and Genos Discord here. I've got a channel in there called Meetup25, and that's where I'll be tagging people who show interest in joining me there. So get yourself in there if that's something you might be interested in. All right, so as I mentioned, the purpose of this episode here is for me to provide some accountability for the leagues that I'm in. I like to do this every year. Blake does it as well, where we talk about the leagues that we're in and how we did and what we did right and what we did wrong. Be as transparent as we possibly can be and try to learn something from the season that was before it kind of fades from memory and we start thinking about next year completely. So that's what we're trying to do here. And hopefully there are some good takeaways here. So the four teams that I was a part of this past season, I was part of the Fantasy Puck Content Creators League, the Apples and Geos Patron League, the Cacuffle Tier 1 Sweden, and also a Keeper League. That's an Apples and Genos run league called We Call Ourselves Experts. A lot of industry experts in that one as well. So those are the teams that I was a part of. I also co-managed all of the listener league teams. Hashtag co-managed. I didn't actually co-manage them at all, but just in case I had to do some commissioner duties in any one of them, I was a co-manager for a team in each one of them. So that's what you see if you're watching this on the YouTube here alongside this. So starting off, I'll start off with the Keeper League here that we call ourselves Experts League. It's a 12-team head-to-head points, keep 3. So you just keep the 3 players you think are the best. There's no, keep a player for this round pick or anything. It's just your first 3 picks are all your keepers from last year. There's a lot of people in this league that you would recognize. Blake's in this league. Hutch is in this league. 18 Skaters, Fired Up. Rod from 5 Hole. Tons and tons of people that you would probably know from around the space. I finished 5th in this league. I was 3rd in regular season and 3rd in points for. I had a bunch of picks at the start of the season after kind of tanking the season prior. I felt like I was kind of a bubble team the season prior and decided to kind of blow it up and try to stockpile picks. I did that pretty successfully, so I had a lot of picks, a lot of good picks for the draft this year. And this is my draft. If you're watching on YouTube, this might be a good one to watch on YouTube and be able to get the visual cues if you're able to, rather than maybe listen if that's your normal method of consuming our content here. But yeah, the first three picks I kept Rantanen, I kept Yossi, and I kept Barkov. So those were my keepers. I actually traded for Barkov to keep him. It was not going to be kept. I think it was Blake actually who had Barkov, and he had decided not to keep Barkov, and so I think I traded like a 10th round pick in the draft to acquire Barkov, since Blake was going to just let him go for free anyway back into the draft. So those were the three keepers that I started the season with. Um, Best picks and worst picks I'll kind of go through here. I think my best picks were probably Kairu at 75. Obviously, he came on huge down the stretch, and he was a big part of what success I did have anyway. And Nikolai Ehlers finally popping. I drafted him at 94. Dylan Genther at 99. Also, obviously, pretty solid there. Worst pick, really, there's only one that I can say here. I took Charlie McAvoy at pick 70, and that obviously did not pan out whatsoever. And there are a million other things I could have done with that pick that would have been much, much better. And yeah, obviously, wish I had at this point. So aside from the draft, which I mean, I can run through the draft, I guess. It's not super exciting, especially if you're listening to kind of get the run through. But yeah, as I mentioned, Rantanen, Yossi, Barkov were my keepers. Picked Hedman, Caulfield, Trocheck, Fiala, Johnston, McAvoy, Kairu, DeBrinket, Ehlers, Genther, and then with my last picks, it was all shots in the dark: Boakvist, Sharangovich, Wool, Mercer, and Owen Power. Those were how I filled out the team. Yeah, the first 13 picks there up to Genther were all yeah, littered with picks that I traded for from the previous season. Very high picks. That's why you see, if you're again watching on YouTube, you can see I had a lot of picks close together early on. That's because those were picks I traded for, trading away players the previous season. All right, so my best moves in season now. Thomas Harley, I picked up on January 9th. That was far and away my best move. Honestly, it was just a schedule play. Miro Heiskanen injury happened on January 28th, and I was still holding Harley at that point. So obviously, that worked out pretty well. My worst move, I think I dropped Alexi Protas right before he went off. That was pretty bad. January 9th. I also dropped Dylan Gunther. That's probably the worst move. Yeah, between the two, I think you got to go with Gunther. I did pick him up obviously in the draft, 99th, and then yeah, October 27th, so very early in the season. I'm 99% sure Utah just had like a 2 game week or something like that, and I was looking at what I could do with that roster spot, and I decided there was something better than Dylan Gunther I could do with that. I think Blake picked him up and got all the best of Dylan Gunther's season there. So yeah, that was definitely a move that I would take back in retrospect, but also it was something that I'll be talking about a bit here. Just ended up being very deep at the wings, which is a good problem to have, but also kind of left me limited in how I could stream. And so it became an issue and kind of led to that drop. And so that is one of the things that I'll be looking to take away from this that you'll see a little bit later on. Trades, I only made one trade this year. There were lots of trades, and I was in a position to go for it. Obviously, I finished third in the regular season, third in points for, so I was around it for sure. Yeah, it was just a spot where I couldn't find the trades that I wanted, and so the only trade that I really ended up making was I traded Fabian Zetterlund, who's obviously kind of a nobody at that point, and a round 11 pick for Pierre-Luc Dubois, Mackenzie Blackwood, and a round 17 pick. Obviously, those picks are in next year's draft. In this league, goalies are really lowly valued. So Blackwood, even though he's obviously a full-time starter and was a very valuable goalie this year, he was not nearly as valuable in this particular league. But I was looking to have at least one goaltender that was kind of a volume goaltender that I would just kind of set and forget, and whether or not he performed was another thing, but at least he was getting volume, and I felt pretty assured of that on a good team. So Trading around 11 pick, which is obviously not a huge pick for next year, and getting Blackwood and also PLD, who had a good schedule in the playoffs. I think for week 22, if I remember, Washington had a good schedule. Which was it? Um, yeah, week 23, I think he was going to give me, or no, actually, it was for before that. Yeah, it was for week 20. So as I was scrapping for the last spot to get into a buy situation, hopefully, yeah, it was week 20 where Washington had 4 games and 4 off nights. And so really the PLD move was just to try to get that 4 games, 4 off nights and try to work myself into the buy, which obviously didn't happen. So next up, I'm going to do for each of these teams a little bit of a playoffs deep dive. So what happened in the playoffs? Because obviously, if you listen to the episode I did similar to this last year I won 3 out of these 4 leagues. I played in the same 4 leagues the previous season, and I won 3 out of the 4. And so last year, it was obviously everything went right, right? Felt like maybe there weren't as many lessons to learn last year for that reason. Um, but this year, with things not going so well, I wanted to deep dive specifically into my playoff moves, my playoff atmosphere. Like, what did I do wrong in the playoffs? Because I did make the playoffs in every league. Spoiler alert, I guess. But I obviously didn't bring home any championships. So, what could I have done differently in the playoffs or leading up to the playoffs, even to have changed that result? So I'm going to do that for each of these teams here. For this keeper league team in particular, so leading up to it, I was in play for a bye till the bitter end. In the last week, I needed a win, and Hutch needed to lose, and I needed to score 30 more points than him roughly on the week to kind of get the tiebreaker, the points for tiebreaker. And I did win, but so did he, and so that didn't happen. But that kind of led me in. So I wasn't like, I didn't have the week before the playoffs to kind of set up. I wasn't just kind of locked in and already thinking about week 22 in week 21. It was decided by the weekend, so I spent my final ad of week 21 on Ryan Hartman because of the Monday, Wednesday off nights to start week 22. So I did get a little bit of a head start on week 22 for that. Then the Monday 3 a.m. rolls around for week 22. Toronto had 4 games played, 2 off nights, and I could fit in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. So I used my first ad of week 22 on Oliver Ekman-Larsson at 3 a.m. on Monday. So I started the week using only one of my 4 potential ads there. I didn't make the second ad until Thursday the 20th. And there I added Frederick Anderson. I needed to hit minimum 3 goalie starts, and Blackwood wasn't actually going to give me 3 starts that week, so I needed to get at least 1 start. But Anderson, with Carolina's schedule that week, was looking at getting the Thursday start and the Sunday start, so 2 potential starts there for Thursday pickup, which is obviously pretty good when streaming goalies. I couldn't really find any optimization over the weekend. If you'll recall, week 22, not the greatest streaming week. Pittsburgh was the only Friday Sunday team that had already been picked clean by the Vultures, the experts in this league. I added Mackie Samoskevich and Alex Laferriere on Sunday for a last ditch effort, but it wasn't nearly enough. In the end, it was a tough streaming week, so that's worth noting. It was a tough streaming week versus a bunch of opponents who really know what they're doing. So I don't want to discount that. First of all, I guess I should say too what the final score was. So it was my opponent scored 245.35 points, and I scored 229.9 points. So the margin of victory was 15 or 16 points, roughly speaking. But yeah, in terms of the streaming, I actually did fairly well. Hartman scored 16.25 points. OEL scored 13.5 points. Anderson had 17.7 points. But in retrospect, maybe I could have used a second ad earlier in the week to squeeze an extra game played or two there. In the end, I honestly don't think it would have mattered in this league. Kairu, Harley, and Fiala did show out for me, but everybody else kind of either was just mediocre or just terrible. I got 6 points from Cole Caulfield in the entire week, 6 fantasy points, that is. 2.7 total points from Brock Faber, who was awful. 3.5 from Mason Lowry, who you may know I was pretty optimistic about due to his early showings, but then kind of completely faded after I picked him up in every league, seemingly. And then last of all, 4.75 total cacophony points, or in this case, WCOE points. We use largely the same system there, but 4.75 points from Mikko Rantanen. That was when he first got to Dallas. They only played 3 games that week, but still, like, just absolutely donuts from Rantanen night after night. I had the exact same amount of games played as my opponent. His top guys, Eichel, Kucherov, Heischer, all of them really came through for him, and my top guys didn't. So that did really feel like what the difference was. Just had too many really bad weeks from good players to really contend in the end. My takeaways in general. So yeah, for the playoffs, did really feel like what it was. I felt like I actually didn't stream too badly. Maybe I could have swung one more early week thing to help myself out there a little bit more, but in the end, I don't think it was terrible what I went through, what I did there. But in terms of overall takeaways for this league, I think I was actually kind of too deep. I kind of mentioned this about Gunther and why I ended up dropping him. I was too deep, but not flexible enough, if that makes sense. That made me drop Gunther, feel like I couldn't stream hard even when there were guys I wanted on the wire. I ended up holding guys like Charlie McAvoy. Even Vincent Trocheck was not very good for large stretches of the year. And I just like was holding on to these guys, felt like I couldn't drop them. They were high picks. And that's, yeah, it's just not where I want to be. I want to be in a spot where I am feeling more flexible and I am feeling like I can take shots on some of these players that are coming up on the waiver wire that I'm interested in. So, yeah, in that case, I think it actually did hurt me a little bit, ironically, to be so deep that I felt like I had too many good players that I shouldn't be dropping. I also think that the second takeaway that I really want to take away from this league in particular, it's a very active league with a lot of trading around the keeper system. The top teams really go for it every year. They really trade away everything from next year's draft to try to bring home a victory in the current season. And I think for myself, when I'm going for it, I just need to make up my mind sooner on these trades and kind of set the market with these trades rather than chase it. I felt that the prices got too high, especially after the wheels got turned in. Some teams made trades, and then more teams made trades, and everybody was starting to get into it, and there was kind of like a domino effect there. And then I just felt like I wasn't willing to pay up for what felt like minor improvements to my lineup. And again, another spot where having all those picks, all those players that I thought were pretty good, it led to me kind of evaluating this and being like, who am I really going to pay up for here? Who am I really going to add that's going to change things for me? And it felt like there wasn't that player available to me at a price that I was willing to pay, where I thought that was actually going to be a difference maker for my lineup. So that's where I ended up with that. All right, moving along. The Apples and Geos Patron League. This is my only categories league, 12-team head-to-head bangers categories league. My only cats league, and one that I will not be dropping anytime soon. Always enjoy playing against the patrons. This league, I finished fifth, third in the regular season there. In terms of all the categories, so I'll give you all the categories here. Goals, assists, power play points, shots on goal, hits, blocks. For goaltenders, we have wins, saves, and save percentage. I finished third in goals, fourth in assists, eighth in power play points, sixth in shots on goal, third in hits, second in blocks, 12th in wins, goalie wins, eighth in saves, and 11th in save percentage. And we'll get into the reasons why. This is my draft here. Best picks here: William Nylander at 17 was obviously pretty good. Zach Werenski, if you drafted Zach Werenski anywhere this year, is obviously a terrific pick. Got him at 56 in this draft. I also got Mark Stone down at 161 in this league, which was obviously tremendous value as well. My worst picks in this league, I took Connor Bedard at 32. Kind of just wanted to have a share of Bedard somewhere. I wasn't thrilled with the other options on the board. Um, and yeah, led me to Bedard there. Obviously, that didn't work out this year whatsoever. Then, yeah, the infamous Jeremy Swayman auto pick in the 7th round, 80th overall. That happened. That was a real thing that happened. Live on stream, video proof exists. Justin Falk at 113 didn't help me much either there. So that was this draft. I'll run through it for the audio listeners. I took Kaprizov first, Nylander second, Bedard third, then Uyghur, Werenski, Tuck, Swayman the auto pick, Suzuki, Hintz, Falk, Gauthier, Toffoli, Moore, Stone, Terry, Schmaltz, Nyes, Corpusalo, York, and Zucker. York and Zucker were picks for the Philadelphia Buffalo series. I think it was Philadelphia Buffalo series, the overseas series at the beginning of the year. I believe so. Anyway, those were my 19th and 20th picks. So it's a deep league. We start 3 center, 3 left wing, 3 right wing. We do have a util spot as well. So pretty deep league, lots of forwards. Not much on the waiver wire for sure in this league. Best moves throughout the season. Quentin Byfield, I added February 3rd. Obviously, he took off shortly thereafter, around that time. Maybe that was around the start. That was obviously a really good one, probably the best one that I had all season. Worst moves, I dropped Mason McTavish on 2 separate occasions, January 13th and February 4th. Basically missed all of his good stretches. I dropped Dylan Holloway. That was earlier in the season, so he hadn't really started his torrid pace that he kind of rounded out with. I dropped him December 22nd. I dropped Mackenzie Blackwood November 29th. I believe that was a few days before he got traded, so that hurts. And I dropped Matthew Nyes on October 25th, so obviously early in the season there. We weren't entirely sure that he was going to stick or be as effective as he was all season at that point, but obviously Matthew Nyes in a Bangers Cats was money this year, and it would have been nice to have him throughout the season. I also was hurting for left wingers this year in this league. Kaprizov injury didn't help in that regard either. So having Nyes would have been very nice just positionally as well. Didn't make any trades in this league. It's often tough to make trades with the patrons. They're often second guessing my trades when I send them to them, and it's totally fair if I'm being honest. And lastly, for this slide here, the playoffs deep dive. So I was ousted in the first round in this one. I guess to go back into the season a little bit, I had a lot to play for in week 21. There was a shot at the bye still available to me here. As I mentioned, I finished third in the regular season. If things had gone really right for me in week 21, then I would have gotten the bye. And as I've mentioned many times, I'm always playing for the bye because that's the biggest thing you can do to get yourself into a championship situation. Didn't go quite right enough. I had a good week, but the team that I needed to have a really bad week didn't. So that didn't happen for me. I did snag Jake Middleton on Sunday of week 21 to prep for that week 22 Monday, Wednesday off night to start the week. So I did get a little bit of prep in for week 22 based on how that week 21 matchup was going and how I saw things going there. I added Martin Pospisil for the Monday, Tuesday back-to-back Calgary had, and Pavel Buchnevich at 3 a.m. on Monday for week 22. Into the week, I added Philip Tomasino for the Friday-Sunday off nights, as Pittsburgh was the only team with the Friday-Sunday off nights, and Tanner Jeannot as a last-ditch effort on the final day to try to grab hits. Ended up losing hits by 15. Alexander Barkov and Gustav Forsling had 7 hits between the two of them. Who knew that was a possibility? I didn't, but here we are. So yeah, in the end, I lost in week 22 here. 5-4 were the categories. I lost goals 17-4. I won assists 24-20. I won power play points 13-11. I won shots on goal 137-122. I lost hits 93-78. I won blocks 58-37. I lost wins 3-1. I lost saves 124-121. And I lost save percentage 849 to 834. Yeah, it was pretty brutal for both of us in terms of the goaltenders. I actually had a pretty comfortable lead early in this league, and it got a lot less comfortable as things went on throughout the week. My skaters did well. Obviously, I won most of the skater categories here, 4 out of the 6. But those were the only 4 categories I won. My tandem was Jeremy Swayman and Spencer Knight, and that was very suspect to say the least. Knight gets blown up on Tuesday versus Seattle of all teams. Swayman didn't get the Monday start, so I didn't get an extra start there that I thought I might get. Both went on Thursday and both lost. Knight did stop 30 of 32. Swayman only 27 of 32, lost 5-1 to Vegas. Neither of them played on Saturday, although their teams were playing, but both did play on the Sunday. My opponent's goalies were playing pretty terribly, so I didn't need a miracle to win at the end. Knight won 7-4 versus Philly, saved 25 of 29. So that meant I only needed 19 saves from Swayman, or basically the save percentage to not be atrocious to win. I could have benched Jeremy Swayman here and won save percentage and lost saves, but the power play points was not a guarantee at this point. The Anaheim Carolina game was still ongoing. My opponent had a couple of players in that game. In retrospect, it's easy to say with hindsight being 2020. Probably should have benched Swayman and sweated the 2 power play points with 2 periods left in that game when the Swayman Boston LA game happened. But I mean, I needed 19 saves or just like an 800 save percentage from Jeremy Swayman to get a win, and he got absolutely obliterated, 7 goals against to Los Angeles that night. So yeah, that was maybe a bit of tough luck. I think I think I should have found another goalie to get a couple starts and take saves earlier in the week. I could have maybe seen that coming. Like Philip Tomasino, the ad that I made, it was helpful, but the chances of him being the difference were not really that high, right? It's kind of a marginal move, and so there's probably a better move that I could have made in that regard. I took blocks by so much that I probably could have taken away a defenseman and added a goaltender and gone that route there. And then, I could have at least had a chance at 2 starts with a goaltender, even if I took a goaltender that wasn't, guaranteed to get 2 starts. I could have dropped Pospisil after his Monday, Tuesday back to back, maybe done that move there. So definitely there are things that I could have done to avoid this one. But yeah, that kind of leads me into my takeaways. Well, first I want to say, just in general, in a deep format like this, I need to be more open to holding players with potential, like a Matthew Nyes, especially in a deep format like this. Like Nyes was hitting enough that he was valuable in this league, and yeah, the potential of him just playing on top line, at least for long stretches, even if he didn't hold down the top line deployment all season long. The Leafs had nobody at left wing; they still really don't. And so he was very likely to play a lot of minutes on the left wing. He was already getting good minutes early in the season. So players like that with potential in a deep format, I think I just need to be much more willing to hold them and kind of let them mature, especially young players like this with ceiling. Yeah, especially in a format like this. I probably should have seen that one coming. Yeah, the Kaprizov injury probably did hold back my, goals, assists, points, power play points, shots on goal totals a fair bit on the season. It was the third time I picked Cap. It was the third of the drafts where I picked up Kaprizov. The Cupful auction and the Fantasy Puck League both took place before the Patron League drafts. And so, yeah, I was staring him down on the board. He was the player that, the spreadsheet said to take, but maybe this was a spot where I didn't need to have three Kaprizov shares across four leagues, and maybe I could have found a different route to go there. Um, Again, hindsight 2020, but maybe that's something to take away for next year. Maybe I don't need to have three out of four leagues where I have my first round pick is the same player, just in terms of diversification kind of strategy. And lastly, Cats is still my worst format by far. It's still easily the thing that frustrates me the most. I'm much more comfortable in a points league. There are obviously debates about what's quote unquote better. I think they're just different iterations of the same game, and I enjoy them both. But I'm still infinitely worse at category leagues, and so I'm still learning a lot in category leagues. And I definitely think I haven't cracked the code either. um, yeah, my goaltenders were pretty terrible all year. Having taken Swayman early, I would have thought that maybe I would have locked down a spot there. But realistically, I probably should have dropped Swayman. He was terrible all season. He submarined my goaltender stats all season long, even when he was getting volume, and he stopped. Yeah, he started getting less volume as the season wore on. In this crucial week, he only gets two starts, and they're both terrible. Yeah, just a bad scene all around in terms of the goaltenders. So yeah, still more to learn here for sure in terms of categories. Something that I want to put some focus on moving forward. And moving forward to the Fantasy Puck Content Creators League, second year in this league. I played there last year and won it the year before. 12-team head-to-head points league. There's two guys from Fantasy Puck in here. Hutch was in here. Hutch won it this year, so shout out to Hutch for doing that and keeping the title in the Apples and Genos family. Appreciate his work there. The other managers in this league, Fantasy Tipped, Ian Gooding from Dauber, Data Draft here on YouTube, Victor Nuno, TJ from Fantasy Five Hole Fantasy Hockey, TJ Stats, who I think is mostly doing stuff on Reddit, Chris Wassel, and Data Driven Hockey, who I think is mostly on Instagram. So, yeah, probably at least some of those names you've known or interacted with. If you're a podcast listener or a YouTube watcher, you've got some idea of these names in the biz. But definitely lots of different content creators in this one. My finish was third on the season, so I finished on the podium at least. Fourth in the regular season, but first in points for, so that was relatively good showing there. The draft. So again, Kaprizov, the first pick here, took him at ninth in this one. Maybe I'll run through the draft first and then talk about the best and worst picks after. Kaprizov, Forsberg, Eichel, Hamilton, Bratt, Werenski, Tuck, Rust, Folk, Horvat, Gunther, Toffoli, Wallman, Jenner, Mrazek, Shilovs, Benson in this one. So best picks, obviously Eichel at 33 was a dunk, Brad at 57, dunk, Werenski at 64, dunk, Gunther at 129, dunk. This was a pretty good draft in terms of finding guys who exceeded their draft position by a fair bit. Usually is for me. Worst picks, Forsberg at 16 obviously didn't return value and was a second straight left winger. I do remember, I'd have to go back and watch the watch the live stream that I did it on, but I do remember feeling like Forsberg was the best player there for me, but I don't actually know who else was on the board. Maybe I should just look it up for a minute and think about it a little bit more. But obviously, Forsberg didn't end up having the best season. He did come on at the end of the season. He wasn't a total train wreck by the end of the season, and my team survived to get me there, obviously. But yeah, there's definitely some better picks that could have been had at that point. So yeah, I took Forsberg at 16, the fourth pick in the second round. Right after Dahlin, Nylander, Marner went later in the round. There are definitely other options out there that I would have preferred to have in retrospect for sure. Nylander probably the preeminent one for sure. So yeah, definitely Forsberg pick could have been better. Falk again. I was big on Justin Falk in the offseason and just never seemed to mesh this year. St. Louis obviously had a terrible start to the year. They fired the coach, and yeah, Falk just seems to play defense all year and not really do anything else. A little bit like Mike Matheson. So yeah, misread something there for sure. I had Falk on multiple teams and had to end up dropping him across the board. Best moves in season. I added Connor McMichael November 4th to catch his hot streak. I added Patrick Kane January 9th. I don't know how many people remember that, but he had like 2 weeks where he's going absolutely nuclear. Every night was multi point. Dmitry Voronkov, December 27th, caught his hot streak, and Sean Monahan, December 23rd. Both of those guys together were absolute money for a hot minute there, basically until Monahan got injured. And actually, for a while afterwards, as Fantilli came up on that line, Voronkov was still good for a while afterward. My worst moves, yeah, just adding Mason Lowry anywhere I did that. I added him thinking he was going to replace some of Dougie Hamilton's production when Hamilton got injured. That obviously didn't come true. I also dropped Thomas Harley on January 6th. I mentioned it before, but Heiskanen's injury was later in January, so obviously it would have been nice to hold Harley through that. I dropped Dustin Wolf on December 18th. That was still when he was splitting starts. And so the volume was inconsistent. He was only getting one start in some weeks. Would have been nice to have him, obviously. I had Macklin Celebrini for a while and dropped him on November 25th. I think San Jose had a 2 game week and decided I could get something else out there. I had Marchenko on this team at one point and dropped him November 5th early in the season. I had Jake Wallman and Matthew Nyes on this team as well and dropped them on October 25th. So lots of big names had on the team and ended up dropping them. Um, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in the takeaways, but definitely had some names go through this team that would have looked good on the end of season roster for sure. Didn't make any trades in this league. Did send out some offers, but didn't get anything done. Playoffs, the deep dive here, I lost in week 20 and week 21, and that took me out of the bye. So that was tough to stomach. I was definitely still trying to win. I was still, doing 3 a.m. ads and doing my normal process, but maybe I lost some focus there. Yeah, just some bad decisions. I rostered Samuel Urson, which was obviously not great. Lowry and Riley were wasted ads in that span. Dougie Hamilton got hurt in week 20, so that was definitely the not a good spot in that week. I got cute. I added Steven Stamkos in week 21 on a 3 game schedule, 3 games, one off night schedule. Basically, just hoping that this was the time where he was going to go off. I think he had already had a couple of decent games the previous week, so I was like, Stamkos, he might go off. I should add him here. And he didn't go off. He had like 1 goal that week, and it didn't help me in that week, and I lost that week, and that depending on who you could have added, that could have been the difference, right? So got a little bit cute there, and it cost me for sure. I did win week 22, so the first week of the playoffs. Added Vamelka and Jake Middleton Monday 3 a.m. This league has a pretty big weight on blocks, so Jake Middleton does that and does some other stuff peripherally as well. And so he at least gets you something if you need a defenseman. And so that's what I went for with the Middleton ad there. And then I got Bowen Byram and Quentin Byfield late in the week. That helped me solidify the win. But also, those 2 ads did also get me 4 games played for week 23. So I was kind of looking ahead already with those ads. Then heading into week 23, added Ryan Hartman at 3 a.m. Monday morning. Throughout the week, I mean, I had 64 games played. My opponent had 58, but my opponent had 9 players crest 30 points. Kucherov had 11 points that week, 11 actual points, not fantasy points, 11 actual points in 3 games. So I had a good week, but it wasn't good enough. His week was incredible. Hartman was kind of a dud, but I added Oliver Ekman-Larsson, David Riddick, and Taylor Hall, and those ads all hit. So those were good on my part. It just wasn't enough. I had Jack Eichel and Alex Tuck both score 4 goals. The rest of the team scored 3 goals combined. Hall scored one of those. So yeah, just not enough scoring there. I honestly don't have a big takeaway from this particular matchup. My ads were pretty good. 3 out of 4 on your ads is pretty good. I just got absolutely boat raced by Kucherov in particular. He just lapped the field and crushed me in multiple spots. And sometimes you just got to tip your cap when that happens. So I don't think in this particular playoffs deep dive I did anything necessarily wrong. Yeah, had more games played. It was just a Kucherov annihilation. Takeaways. So going back to what I was talking about before with dropping some of these players who are really good. In a league like this, there are just routinely tremendous waiver wire options available. Um, yeah, just overall, it's probably the least competitive of the 4 leagues that I play in, and so I don't think like I dropped Jake Wallman, I dropped Macklin Celebrini, I dropped Matthew Nyes, I dropped Kirill Marchenko. I actually don't think that that was like what lost me the league or anything. They're probably better than marginally better than some of the players that I ended up hanging on to. Like, would I rather have Marchenko than Stamkos? Obviously. But I don't think that that's necessarily what lost me the league because there were always those options available. There were always new guys available on the waiver wire that I was really excited about adding at any given time. So yeah, I'm not convinced. Like maybe some of those guys I should have found a way to hold on to. There were times when I was trying to find 2-for-1 deals to try to open up an extra spot so I wouldn't have to drop somebody. But those deals never came through for me. And so, yeah, I ended up having to do what I thought was best at the time. Maybe it was for that week, but it wasn't overall, and that's still a balance I'm trying to figure out. But also on the flip side of this, I think it means I shouldn't hold on as strongly to players who aren't performing, especially in a league like this where the competition for the waiver wire players is not that fierce, I guess. Like I held Justin Falk till November 10th. I held Connor McMichael after he went cold till December 30th. Those are players like as soon as they went cold or as soon as they weren't performing, I could have just dropped them. There were other players available. I don't. This is not a league where I need to hang on and see if my preseason takes like come home to roost or something like that, right? This is not a league where you need to do that because there are constantly good players available, players with good underlying metrics who are also performing at this exact moment. And so you just don't need to kind of overthink it, I guess, in that way. You can just drop guys who aren't performing right now and not live through cold streaks just because the numbers say that they will get better eventually. So that's one takeaway in this kind of league for sure. I also, in this particular league, need to do a better job of prioritizing finding a volume goaltender who's in a not terrible situation. I think I spent a few too many ads on goaltenders and managers in this league hang on to their goaltenders even when they're not performing or just flat out killing them. And so there isn't as much turnover at the goalie position as there are in the other leagues that I play in. So it's a different mindset of my opponents, and I have to adjust my playstyle to react. And so where I might be churning through goaltenders a lot faster and, dropping some players like a Dustin Wolf, who obviously would have been probably pretty good to hang on to throughout the season. Maybe in this league, I have to be like, actually, I think this guy's good or at least playing well at the moment. And so I will hold him through that 1 game week, that week where he might only start the 1 game and not just churn my goalies the way I normally do because he's going to get picked up by somebody else and then I'm never going to see him again. And that may not be true. Maybe it's just the particular times that I was looking for a goaltender. The best players had already been snatched up. I think I just need to be a little bit more open to it, and I will find it. So, yeah, I think it is just a little bit of a mindset. I need to actually prioritize finding that at least one volume goaltender in this league and actually hanging on because over the course of the season, at least, I think that will be the better strategy rather than having to use those ads constantly because no one else is churning goalies the way that I am. And then lastly, in this one, I don't want to beat myself up too badly. I think that, obviously, the Kaprizov injury hit me hard in all three leagues where I had him, and that's pretty obvious to say. But this one, I also had a Dougie Hamilton injury towards the end of the season, week 20, as I mentioned. So two out of my top four picks were gone for playoffs. I was still around it. I was still there. I still had a good showing in the playoffs. Won one round, had a decent score, just not a great score in the second round, and got destroyed by Kucherov, as I mentioned. So yeah, I think overall, I actually think I played this league pretty well. Obviously, first in points four is nothing to sneeze at. I kind of expect that that's where I should be around in this league. Um, but I don't think I need to beat myself up too badly for this league in particular. Um, had some injuries. I don't think injuries are predictable. You can argue with a wall. So I think that, yeah, it's just a spot where it kind of fell that way for me, and I don't need to beat myself up too badly for this particular league. All right, last league, a couple tier one Sweden. If you're not aware, this is the Keeping Carlson League. You have to be a patron to join, and then there are tiers. So you progress up the tiers as you go, year by year. If you continue to win, you'll get up to tier one, where basically all the top managers are. I think there's close to 500 managers in all the tiers now, so it's a pretty significant amount of managers. And obviously, being at the top actually means something. It's taken me a few years to get here, but yeah, it's a great league and a lot of really good competition. I really respect the opposition in this league for sure. I finished third in this league as well. I finished first in the regular season actually, and second in points for. I went 17-4 in the regular season. I didn't lose in the new year until I lost in the playoffs. So I had a tremendous run, but obviously fell short there. Go to talk about the draft. So, without mentioning every single dollar value here, I had this is an auction draft. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Tier 1 is an auction draft in Cacuffle. All the other tiers do normal snake drafts, slow drafts. But yeah, Tier 1 is an auction draft. I had Quinn Hughes, Kirill Kaprizov, Timo Meyer, Matt Boldy, Patrick Kane, Drew Doughty, Zach Werenski, Mike Matheson, Jacob Chikrin, Frank Ficciano, Petr Mrazek, Gabriel Velarde, Matthias Ekholm, Ryan O'Reilly, Barrett Hayton, Blake Coleman, Andrew Mangiapane, and Eric Holla. So the last four picks actually were cut off. So we only used the auction draft on the first 14, and then the last four picks we did a snake draft, a slow snake draft to close it out. So should mention that as well. So yeah, best picks here, like Quinn Hughes for $28. I was pretty shocked when I got this. It was very early. I think the way that I'm reading this, I think he was the third player off the board, and so people were still settling in. And I think I can't remember exactly, but I think I had him at like a $35 value according to my spreadsheets. And yeah, I got him at 28, and I was just kind of like, oh wow, okay, that's awesome. And so that was obviously a huge one. It got Werenski for $29. Obviously, another huge one. Having two of the top three defensemen in the league, obviously, going to set you up pretty well. Also got Jacob Chikrin for $8. That obviously hit in a pretty big way. Gabriel Velarde for $6 hit in a pretty big way. I think Kaprizov was trending towards being a really big hit for $59. Kind of the cheapest of the first round players. So that was a good spot for me to get in on him. But obviously the injury cut that one short. My worst picks, Timo Meyer, I paid $41 for. That obviously did not pan out whatsoever. That was one of my bigger misses on the season, which is another thing I'll be talking about later on in terms of my projections and my preseason takes. Mike Matheson, I paid $19 for. I just didn't anticipate that Lane Hudson would take over so fast. And so I did. You can go back and listen. We were talking about how there was a good chance that Lane Hudson would be taking over reps by the end of the season. I just thought that I would get a lot of value out of Matheson in the meanwhile, and that never really came to fruition. Patrick Kane for $16. I don't think this was the worst spending of the money that I could have done, but when you look at, yeah, getting Chikrin for $8, like you wonder if I could have split Kane into a couple of other $8 shots, could I have really raised the ceiling with a couple of better takes later on? So that one, it just felt like I paid a premium for a non-premium player almost. So didn't love that one, and I did talk about that in the live in the on the stream. Like shortly after it happened, I was starting to feel like maybe that was just a little bit too much, even if it made sense by the spreadsheet. Just the way the draft was trending, the way the dollar values were trending at that point, I was starting to feel like I could get comparable players for less money. Best moves in season. Added PLD for $11 Fab on November 11th, and he stayed on my team the entire time and obviously had a pretty good season. I added Mackenzie Blackwood on December 9th. He was still on San Jose at that point, but obviously then he gets traded to Colorado, and he's just sitting there on my roster already. That was pretty sweet. Obviously very lucky. Added Joey Decord for $11 Fab on October 22nd and kept him for the rest of the season, and he was terrific. So yeah, got my goaltenders settled there. That was obviously terrific moves. Some luck there for sure, but yeah, correctly assessing that Decord was going to be a volume goaltender back on October 22nd. I'm not sure that was a common take at that point in the season. Grubauer was obviously still around, still terrible, but still around. But the cord really did take off and command a ton of volume and be very valuable for that reason alone. Worst moves, I dropped Ryan Donato. I had Donato on this team and dropped him on January 29th, like right before he went off, went nuclear on the back end of the season. I had Ryan O'Reilly, dropped him on January 12th, and then he went on a bit of a run not long after that. And I had Mason Marchment and dropped him on November 3rd. And he was pretty good, actually, throughout the season when he was playing, at least. Didn't make any trades in this league either. Again, had some offers, sent some offers. Nothing really got too close, to be honest. There were not a lot of trades made. I think there were only 4 total trades made in this league as well. So it wasn't a big trading group. Playoffs deep dive. Yeah, as I mentioned, rolled into the first place bye in this one. I had week 21 and 22 to prep for the week 23 start. There was nothing left to play for. The bye was sewn up. So I had lots of time. I added Mason Marchment back in week 21, and I couldn't really find another angle to prep until the last minute. I had multiple players that were no longer injured in my IR Plus that I kind of wanted to hang on to and see how they perform and what the minutes would be and stuff like that before making a decision on who to drop and who to keep. So yeah, basically at the last second of week 22, I dropped Matthias Ekholm, Alex Killorn, and Blake Coleman, and added Simon Edvinsson just to optimize the early week. Detroit had the Monday, Tuesday back-to-back in the early week. I just wanted to optimize that even further. Then Monday hits. I don't make any 3 a.m. ads. I've got all 4 ads for the week. But Monday hits, and Gabe Velarde is now out week to week. And obviously, it turns out he's been out for the entire regular season here. So that couldn't have come at a worse time. If it had come the day before, I could have either not dropped one of those players that I did drop or add somebody else. But came on Monday, ended up adding JT Comfort in his place. I placed a waiver for the next day, for Tuesday, for Ryan Hartman, as I could fit him in for the week, and he had done well for me elsewhere the previous week in week 22. This was, in retrospect, this was greedy, and it did end up locking up my lineup on the heavy nights, and he kind of underperformed on the week. So I was more already looking ahead for that juicy schedule that Minnesota had in week 24. The 4 games, 4 off nights, and thought that I could get Hartman in. So getting 3 games out of Hartman for the remainder of the week and then 4 games the following week was really good. And he basically didn't play well, and I didn't make it to week 24, didn't win week 23. So obviously kind of looked ahead too much with that ad. I did open up a pretty big lead on Monday night. I had Timo Meier have 2 goals. Edvinsson hit. He had 2 assists the first night. And also just had like a full lineup on the first night because of all the pre-optimization that I had been doing. So I just had a lot of volume, even just the shots and blocks and stuff adding up. Got me a bunch of points on that opening Monday. Chikrin, I wasn't expecting to play on Tuesday, but he did. He had that cut at that time, and so based on what I was hearing, I didn't think he was going to play, but he did, and so I ended up dropping Comfer, who I only got in for one lackluster Monday game, and then Comfer, of course, scores a goal and an assist on the Tuesday game after I drop him. You live and you learn. Added Jeff Skinner for the Wednesday, Thursday back to back. He had 8 shots in those 2 games, but didn't score any points. So felt like it was good process, but not good results there. My opponent had a big Tuesday, kept creeping back and back, took the lead Friday, ended up winning 286.8 to 272.65. So it was relatively close, 14 points difference there. I tried to add John Gibson as a last ditch Sunday goaltenders, but then the Ducks went and played Dostal for the second game in a row. They hadn't done that in forever, and so that was really unexpected for me. And I was pretty sure that Gibson was going to get added before he was confirmed anyway, so I felt like I had to make that add. He was the only goaltender really out there that was going to be available. And so I was behind obviously as well, and so I felt like I kind of had to go with the goaltender and hope for like a big shutout game or something, and then he doesn't even play. That was pretty annoying. My opponent had Sebastian Aho, scored 3 points, including a shorthanded point, which counts in this format. Strome had a couple points, and that was basically curtains for me. On the week, my opponent had Kucherov in this league as well. Had Nylander, Makar, and Aho all going off that week. So really big week from the Stars of my opponent. I had 68 games played. My opponent had 59. Plus 9 games played advantage is pretty significant. But my team, again, Mason Marchment led my team in fantasy points, and obviously that's probably just not going to be good enough. Again, I do find it a little bit hard to find a super significant takeaway here. I feel like I did use the buy to full advantage. Kept my players on the IR plus and got a good look at them and decided who I wanted to keep and who I wanted to drop. Then made the ads I wanted to. I had so many more games played, had this all optimized, but I, in the end, just kind of got beat by studs being studly. Maybe if I had Kaprizov and Velarde that week, it's a different story. Who knows? So takeaways in this one. First off, this is a 16-team league against some of the best competition I've ever personally gone against, and I still, basically crushed 0G with Blackwood and Decord. Some luck, obviously, with Blackwood getting traded while I already had him on the roster, but Decord, I think, was a good pickup. Somebody was going to have these players on their team. You do not need to spend money in an auction draft or draft capital in a snake draft, a standard snake draft on goaltending. You do not need to do it. You can pick up goaltenders off the waiver wire in any league all season long. The draft itself, because it's an auction draft, it's a little bit interesting, obviously. I had some major hits that I talked about, but it was by no means a perfect draft. Like Meyer was a big loss. Boldy was probably not worth what I paid for him either. It wasn't a perfect draft, but it was still very good and against good managers. So for me, what I'm taking away from that is that the process was good. Like the spreadsheets were working, how he's approaching the draft in the draft, adjusting to the costs that were happening in the draft that were not lining up with my spreadsheet. I was only really going in on really good values, not just like, this guy is right at my value, so that means I should bid on him. No, you can wait and try to get really good values, and oftentimes, there's a lot of players out there. You'll probably find enough players to fill your team where you have much bigger value than other players, and so you end up finding players who are actually a really good value for you. I also found that the value in the low dollar range, like in this draft in particular, the value in the $3 to $8 range was just insane. Gabe Velarde, Matt Duchene, Tyler Toffoli, Macklin Celebrini, Dylan Strome, Nick Schmaltz, Thomas Hurdle, Mark Stone, There's just no reason to pay double digits for mid players, and that goes back to the Patrick Kane acquisition that I had, right? I just didn't need to have that on this roster when I could have taken multiple shots later on, yeah, more of those kind of players and ended up better. So I think that was actually a pretty good takeaway as well for the auction draft looking ahead to next year. All right, coming right up on an hour. And that is all the takeaways that I had for those specific leagues. The final takeaways here: zero G without exception. It works in every league. It just works. You don't need to do anything different. As I mentioned, I will have my zero G episode coming out and not too long from now. So you can look forward to that, and I'll dig deep into the season that was, the goaltenders that did and didn't perform, etc. Same thing I do every year. One of the final takeaways, I really do need to continue to find the correct balance between holding good players and streaming hard. On one hand, I'm getting results. My regular season results are quite good. The worst finish that I had was fourth in the Fantasy Puck League, and I was first in points in that league. Yeah, basically across the board, I'm doing very well in very competitive leagues. So I feel pretty good about the process overall, but I still think there is a little bit more balance to be found with holding some good players and not having to stream those players who might hit, who I'm legitimately into and interested in, but I'm still streaming them out and making hard decisions against them just because I feel like I got to squeeze that extra game played or a couple of games played. Maybe there are some of those instances where I don't need to, and I need to identify those. And then I want to stress again, I've never arrived, quote unquote, arrived. I don't want to get complacent. That's why I do these episodes. That's why I do these deep dives. That's why I go back and did this huge in-depth deep dive into my playoff scenarios and what I could or couldn't have done in those specific scenarios, what I may be able to learn for next time around in those 1 week scenarios where everything hinges on those ads and those decisions. You've never arrived, no matter how good you've gotten, no matter if you've won your league the last 3 years in a row and you're just running away with it. There's always something you can learn, and so I do encourage everybody to do that. I feel like I'm playing at a pretty high level against really good managers, but I do not feel like I have arrived or that I can just kind of coast at this point. There's always more to learn, and I'm trying to get better each and every season. And last off here, I just want to ask: is it draft season yet? Because I'm ready. I want to get back in. I want to get back there. It stings a little bit. I can't lie. It stings to not bring home a championship this year. At the end of it all, relatively successful year in terms of the regular season, but to come away without a trophy at the end of it doesn't feel good. So I'm ready, and I want to get back into it. Well, if you made it this far, you should definitely click the link, join the Discord community, talk fantasy hockey with us. We're going to be in there all summer as news comes down, as things develop, the draft happens, free agency happens. We're going to be talking about all of that and giving our takes. So join the Discord community, like, rate, review, subscribe, comment, whatever you can do. It really does help us out. But that is going to be all that I've got for this episode. So hopefully it brought you some value, helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. Any advanced stats you may have heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band There for supplying music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.